want to help a stray animal? Just subscribe, like, comment, and watch until the end, and you'll be helping save a precious life. Every action makes a real difference. The cat wouldn't leave the cabinet until she opened it and discovered the unthinkable. Letter from a cat, dearest Meredith. I wonder if you can feel me there beside you as you read these words. Not as a ghost or spirit, nothing so fanciful as that, but as the warmth in the room that reminds you of afternoons when I would curl against your hip while you read. Or perhaps as that inexplicable urge you still have to check behind you before closing a door, the habit formed from years of my silent following. Some bonds don't need magic to outlast goodbye. They say cats can't write letters, and I suppose that's true enough. But if I could have found a way to leave you words instead of just paw prints on your heart, they would have looked something like this. I need you to know why I kept vigil by that cabinet. Why, in my final weeks, when walking became difficult and my old bones protested every movement, I still dragged myself across the hardwood floor to sit before its closed doors. You thought it was confusion, perhaps, the wandering mind of an aging cat. You gently carry me back to my cushion by the window, your voice soft with concern. Harlan, what's gotten into you, old boy? But I would always return when you weren't looking. It was the quilt, Meredith. The one you started when Daniel left. The one you couldn't bring yourself to finish. We met at Lakeside Animal Shelter in Traverse City, Michigan, though I doubt you remember the exact date the way I do. October 17th, 2009. A Tuesday afternoon with rain that smelled like the turning leaves. You weren't there for a cat. You weren't there for any animal at all. You'd come to drop off a donation of old towels and blankets, things Daniel had left behind that you couldn't stand to look at anymore. I watched you from my cage, this tall woman with auburn hair going silver at the temples, eyes red-rimmed from crying, though you were trying to hide it behind oversized sunglasses. You'd push them up onto your head while talking to Nancy at the front desk, forgetting they were there. Your hands moved as you spoke, revealing a pale line where your wedding ring had been until recently. You were just about to leave when the shelter lost power, one of those sudden Midwest autumn storms. In the darkness and confusion, with flashlights bobbing and volunteers rushing around, you somehow ended up in the cat room. Maybe you took a wrong turn. Maybe fate has a sense of humor. Nancy gave you a flashlight, asked if you'd mind checking on the cats while they dealt with a frightened dog in the back. And there you were, this accidental visitor, your beam of light sweeping across our faces. Most of the other cats pressed forward, meowing for attention. I didn't. At 12 years old, I'd been at Lakeside longer than any other animal. The permanent resident, they called me. Too old, too plain, just a grey tabby with one torn ear and a habit of watching rather than performing. I'd learned that people wanted kittens or exotic breeds with flat faces and striking patterns. They didn't want an old tomcat who'd been surrendered after his elderly owner died. Your light landed on me last. I blinked slowly at you, the way cats do when they're not afraid. You paused. Well, you're a dignified old soul, aren't you? You said, your voice the first kind thing I'd heard all day. You set down your flashlight on a nearby table, the beam creating a small circle of light between us. Then you did something unexpected. You sat down on the cold concrete floor, right there in your good wool coat, and you started to cry. Not delicate tears. These were body-racking sobs that seemed to come from someplace deep and wounded. I'd never seen a human break that way before, without audience or apology. Just pure, unfiltered grief. I'm sorry, you whispered to no one in particular. I don't know how to do this alone. I don't know what made me do it. In 12 years, I'd never tried to escape my cage, but something about your sadness called to mine. I pressed my paw against the latch, a trick I'd observed but never attempted, and pushed until it gave way. The door swung open with a squeak that was lost beneath your crying. I jumped down and walked to you, my paws silent on the concrete. You didn't notice me until I was beside you, until I pressed my body against your leg and began to purr. You gasped, then laughed through your tears. How did you get out, Mr. Cat? I looked up at you, blinking slowly again, and you, without hesitation, picked me up and held me against your chest like I was something precious, something necessary. You feel like a Harlan, you whispered into my fur, steady and patient. When the lights came back on 20 minutes later, Nancy found us that way. You sitting on the floor with mascara tracked down your cheeks, me purring in your arms. She started to apologize, to explain that I wasn't actually up for adoption because of my age and health issues. But you cut her off. I think we've already adopted each other, you said simply. You filled out the paperwork with me, still cradled in one arm. When Nancy asked if you wanted to know about my medical issues, the arthritis, the early kidney disease, you just nodded and said, "We're both a little broken. We'll figure it out together." And that was how, at 48, you took home your first cat, and how at 12, I found my last human. Our beginning wasn't what either of us had planned. You just finalized your divorce after Daniel left you for his younger office assistant. 23 years of marriage ended with signed papers and half-empty closets. I'd been waiting for death in that shelter, resigned to my fate after my previous human Eleanor passed away in her sleep. Your small craftsman house in Leland became our shared sanctuary. That first night, you apologized for the boxes still scattered around, for the half-emptied bookshelves where Daniel's history books had been. "It's a work in progress," you said as you set my carrier down in the living room. "We both are." I explored cautiously while you prepared my food and litter box. The house smelled of lemon furniture polish, black tea, and lingering sadness. Through the open window came the distant sound of Lake Michigan, its waters brushing against the shore a few blocks away. When I came back to the living room, you were sitting on the couch, staring at the empty wall where photographs had once hung. I jumped up beside you, not too close, respectful of boundaries, and began to groom my paw. "I don't know who I am without him," you confessed to the quiet room to me. Isn't that pathetic? 23 years, and I forgot to remember myself. I had no answers for you, Meredith, just the comfort of another beating heart in a too-quiet house. Those first months, we established our rhythms. You would wake early, make your tea, Earl Grey with a splash of milk, and carry it to the back porch, where you'd watch the sunrise over the distant shimmer of water. I would follow, settling beside you on the wicker love seat, both of us wrapped in the quilt your grandmother had made. You'd stroke my fur absently while working through the Traverse City Record Eagle crossword puzzle, occasionally asking me for 7-letter words meaning persistence or renewal. You returned to teaching English at the high school after a brief leave of absence. On school days, you'd kiss the top of my head before leaving, promising to be home by 4. "Hold down the fort, Harlan," you'd say, and I'd watch from the front window as you backed your blue Subaru out of the driveway. In the afternoons, you'd grade papers at the kitchen table while I sprawled across them, a living paperweight. You never shooed me away, just worked around my presence, occasionally reading passages aloud that particularly moved you. "Listen to what this student wrote about loss, Harlan," you'd say, and I'd flick my tail to show I was listening. Weekends were for small adventures. You'd put me in my carrier and drive us to the lake, where you'd set up a folding chair on the less crowded parts of the beach. You'd read poetry aloud. Mary Oliver was your favorite. While I dozed in the dappled shade, the sound of waves a constant backdrop to your voice. I should feel embarrassed, you told me once, as an elderly couple walked past, giving us curious looks. A middle-aged woman reading Whitman to her cat on a Saturday afternoon. But somehow, I don't. That first winter together, the snowdrifts piled high against the windows, and the wind off the lake cut like glass. You started the quilt then, a simple pattern of blues and greens that reminded you of water. "A project to get through the dark months," you explained, as you set up your sewing machine on the dining table. I would watch you work, fascinated by your capable hands, The way you lined up the edges just so, the gentle whir of the machine like a mechanical purr. Sometimes you'd talk as you worked, about your students, about the book club you'd finally joined, about Daniel and the life you thought you'd have. He never wanted children, you told me one night as snow fell in thick curtains outside. I did once, but I convinced myself that his happiness was more important than mine. Funny how we do that, isn't it? Shrink ourselves to fit someone else's vision. You worked on that quilt all winter, but when spring came, something changed. A letter arrived. I recognized Daniel's handwriting on the envelope, and after reading it, you carefully folded the unfinished quilt and put it away in the sewing cabinet. You didn't cry. You just closed the doors with a quiet finality and didn't open them again. That was the spring you planted your first garden. Tomatoes, basil, zinnias in riots of color. You built me a little enclosure with chicken wire so I could safely enjoy the outdoors while you worked the soil. New life from dirt, you said, pressing seeds into the dark earth. Who would have thought it possible? I could tell you about all our years together, Meredith, but some memories stand out more vividly than others. Like the summer night of the power outage, when you carried me to the backyard and we lay on a blanket, watching stars appear in the blackened sky one by one, like pinholes in the fabric of the universe. You pointed out constellations I couldn't see and told me the myths behind them, tales of love and loss and transformation. Or the morning you found that lump beneath my chin, how your hands trembled as you gently probed it, the way your voice broke when you called the vet, the fear in your eyes as we waited for test results, the relief when Dr. Abernathy said it was benign, how you splurged on the expensive cat food after that, saying, "Life's too short for mediocre meals, Harlan." I remember the day your first short story was published in the local literary journal. You danced around the kitchen holding the magazine, reading the piece aloud to me, your voice climbing octaves with excitement. I never would have submitted it if you hadn't knocked my laptop off the bed that day, you told me, though we both knew that was giving me too much credit for your courage. There was the Christmas you invited your sister Corinne and her family to stay, the first holiday you'd hosted since the divorce. I watched you prepare for days, polishing silver that had been your mother's, baking cookies from recipes yellowed with age. You seemed nervous, restless. "They haven't seen me without Daniel," you confessed as you changed your outfit for the third time. "What if they think I've let myself go? What if they pity me?" I meowed at that, offended on your behalf. You looked more yourself than ever, your hair now fully silver and worn in a short, stylish cut that framed your face, your eyes brighter, your laugh quicker. You wore colors again. When Corinne arrived with her husband and teenage daughters, I stayed hidden under the bed, overwhelmed by the noise and motion. But later, when the house had quieted and everyone had gone to sleep, I found you sitting alone in the kitchen, a glass of wine in your hand and a soft smile on your face. "They said I seem happy," you whispered to me as I wound between your ankles. "And you know what, Harlan? I think I am." The years passed this way. Quiet triumphs, small sorrows, the accumulation of days that make up a life. You retired from teaching after 30 years, celebrated with a garden party where former students came to toast you with lemonade and tell stories about how you'd changed their lives. I watched from the safety of the screen porch, proud of my human who had touched so many. You took up photography in your retirement, focusing your lens on small, overlooked beauties, dewdrops on spider webs, the particular curl of a fern unfurling, the pattern of light through leaves. You'd show me each image on your camera's small screen, narrating what you'd seen and why it mattered. "Look at this one, Harlan," you'd say. "See how the light catches just the edge of the shell?" That's how I feel sometimes, illuminated only on the parts of me that face a certain direction. I was slowing down by then, 16, 17, 18 years old, ancient for a cat who'd started out with health problems. My kidneys were failing gradually, my arthritis making it harder to jump onto your bed at night. You noticed, of course. You built little ramps for me to reach my favorite windowsills. You warmed my food to make it more enticing when my appetite waned. You carried me gently when the distance seemed too far. Last spring, when I turned 19, you threw me a birthday party, just the two of us, but you made it special. A tiny portion of roast chicken on your grandmother's china plate, a catnip toy wrapped in tissue paper that you helped me unwrap. 19 years, you marveled, stroking my thinning fur. You've been with me for 10 of them. A decade, Harlan. Can you believe it? I purred in response, leaning into your touch. My vision was clouding by then, my hearing not what it once was. But I could still feel the gentle pressure of your fingers, could still recognize the particular cadence of your breathing. It was around then that I started sitting by the sewing cabinet. At first, just for short periods, an hour in the morning while you did yoga, another in the afternoon while you read. But as summer turned to fall, I found myself drawn there more frequently, more urgently. I knew what was happening to my body. Animals don't fear death the way humans do. We recognize it as another transition, like waking or sleeping. But I feared leaving you alone. I worried about the silence I would leave behind. You noticed my fixation with the cabinet, of course. You tried to distract me with treats placed across the room, with gentle relocations to sunny spots by windows. But I would always return when I could. "What's in there that's so fascinating, old friend?" you asked one evening, kneeling beside me to peer at the cabinet as if seeing it through my eyes. "It's just my sewing things." But it wasn't just sewing things, was it, Meredith? It was the unfinished quilt. The project you'd abandoned when Daniel's letter came, the one telling you he and Stephanie were expecting a child together, the dream you'd set aside because it hurt too much to hold. I knew I was running out of time. My body was betraying me in new ways each day, refusing food, struggling for breath, failing to keep me warm despite the heating pad you placed in my bed. Dr. Abernathy had been honest with you at my last visit. He's had an exceptionally long life, Meredith, especially considering his conditions, but you'd stopped her there, not ready to hear the rest. But I saw how you watched me after that, how you measured my suffering against my joy, weighing the hardest decision a pet owner makes. 3 weeks ago, on that unusually warm October afternoon, I collapsed trying to reach the cabinet. You found me there. My legs splayed awkwardly, my breathing labored. The fear in your eyes nearly broke me. You gathered me in your arms, so gently, always so gently, and held me against your chest the way you had that first day at the shelter. "It's okay, Harlan," you whispered, though your tears told a different story. "I've got you." You called Dr. Abernathy, who agreed to come to the house. While waiting, you carried me to your bed, laying me on your pillow, surrounding me with warmth. You lay beside me, your face level with mine, and told me stories of our time together, the day I caught the mouse in the pantry, the time I knocked over your water glass during a Zoom call with your principal, the night we both got scared by the same thunderclap and then looked at each other in embarrassed understanding. "You saved me," you said simply, your fingers tracing the outline of my face. "You know that, don't you? You saved me when I didn't know how to save myself." When Dr. Abernathy arrived, her kind eyes took in the situation immediately. She examined me with gentle hands, then sat on the edge of the bed beside you. "It's time, isn't it?" you asked, your voice barely audible. She nodded. "He's in pain, Meredith, and it will only get worse." You asked for a moment alone with me first. When the door closed behind the vet, you gathered me close again, your tears falling onto my fur. "I don't know how to say goodbye," you confessed. "I don't know how to let you go." I summoned what strength I had left and turned my face toward yours, pressing my nose against your cheek. One last touch, one last connection. "Okay," you said after a long moment, your voice steadier. "Okay, Harlan, I understand." What happened next was peaceful. Dr. Abernathy was kind and efficient. You held me the entire time, your hands warm against my cooling body, your voice in my ear telling me I was loved, that I was good, that I had made your life better just by being in it. My last thought as consciousness faded was of you, Meredith. Not of sadness or regret, but of gratitude. For the second chance we gave each other, for the home we built from broken pieces, for the love that asked nothing but presence. I know you buried me in the garden, beneath the crabapple tree that blooms pink in spring. I know you placed my favorite toy mouse beside me, wrapped in one of your soft scarves. I know because I heard you tell Corinne on the phone afterward, your voice breaking when you said, he wasn't just a pet. He was my companion through the hardest years of my life. For days after, you moved through the house like a ghost, reaching for me in empty spaces, calling my name before catching yourself. You'd stop in doorways, waiting for the sound of my following pause that never came. But yesterday something changed. You woke from a nap on the couch, disoriented and tearful from a dream you couldn't quite remember. You walked through the house calling for me, checking all my hiding spots, and then, as if drawn by an invisible thread, you found yourself standing before the sewing cabinet. You stared at it for a long time, your hand hovering over the knob. Then slowly, deliberately, you opened it. Inside was the quilt, just as you'd left it years ago, blues and greens like lake water, half-assembled pieces waiting for your return. But tucked between the folds was something else. My collar, the blue one with the silver fish-shaped tag, the one I'd somehow slipped out of weeks before my death. You'd looked everywhere for it, finally replacing it with a new one when the search proved futile. You lifted it with trembling fingers, the small bell tinkling in the quiet room. And then you began to laugh through your tears, the laugh of someone who finally understands a message long delivered but never received. You spent the rest of the day at your sewing machine, my collar placed carefully beside you as you worked. You finished the quilt as darkness fell, your hands remembering what they'd once begun. When it was done, you wrapped yourself in it and sat on the back porch, watching stars appear one by one. "Thank you, Harlan," you whispered to the night, "for everything you couldn't say. This is why I kept vigil by the cabinet, Meredith. Not because I knew my collar was there, though perhaps some animal instinct sensed it, but because I understood what the unfinished quilt represented. The dreams you'd put away, the parts of yourself you'd forgotten to remember. I couldn't speak to you in life, couldn't tell you that it was okay to finish what you'd started, to wrap yourself in the comfort of your own creation. That Daniel's new life didn't negate your right to the one you'd imagined. That some things, once begun, deserve completion, not because they're perfect, but because they're yours. I couldn't tell you that the greatest gift you gave me wasn't the food or shelter or medical care, though I appreciated all of those. It was witnessing your reconstruction, watching you gather the scattered pieces of yourself and assemble them into something new, something authentic, something beautiful. You used to say, I saved you, but the truth is, we saved each other. You gave an old cat a dignified final chapter. I gave you permission to begin again. I don't know if there's an afterlife for cats, some great sunbeam in the sky where we nap eternally, or perhaps a cosmic mouse hunt that never ends. But I do know this: whatever consciousness allowed me to love you continues in some form. Not as a ghost or supernatural presence, but as a part of the world you still inhabit, in the garden where my body enriches the soil, in the memories that make you smile unexpectedly, in the spaces of your heart that learn to love again. Tomorrow, you'll take that finished quilt and wrap it around your shoulders as you walk to the lake. You'll watch the water and think about time, how it takes things away, yes, but also how it delivers us to new versions of ourselves. You'll remember the feel of my fur beneath your fingers, the weight of me against your legs at night. You'll cry a little, but you'll smile too. And then you'll go home and call the shelter, because your heart, that magnificent, resilient muscle, has room again. Not to replace me, never that, but to continue what we started together. The practice of beginning again, of loving despite loss, of making something beautiful from what remains. I'll be there, Meredith. Not in form, but in essence, in the courage it takes to open another cage, to welcome another beating heart into your home, in the knowledge that loving is always worth the inevitable goodbye. Thank you for the life we shared, for the quiet mornings and gentle evenings, for the patience as my body failed, for holding me close until the very end. Most of all, thank you for finally opening the cabinet, for finishing what you started. With all the love a cat can give, which, as you now know, is boundless, Harlan P.S. When you meet your new companion, whoever they may be, tell them about me someday. Tell them about the grey tabby with the torn ear who taught you how to start again. And when they find their own way to love you, as they surely will, know that I am purring my approval from wherever consciousness goes when bodies fade away.